morning. This is Seattle Today with Cliff Lenz and Shirley Hudson.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Would you ever consider suing your husband for rape, as Greta Rideout did in Salem, Oregon in 1978? Marital rape is a misdemeanor in Washington. Our guest today feels that the national attention given to the issue of marital rape is long overdue. She's here to tell us why. Our guest is the president of the Women's History Research Center in Berkeley, California. Meet Laura X. Laura, I think the term marital rape is conflicting in many people's minds. We all know what rape is, but marital rape, could you define exactly what you mean by that?
I hope, by the way, that we don't all know what rape is, at least in our own experience. I think that the statistics are now showing that without counting women who are raped by their husbands, a third of all women have been raped, half of them under the age of 18, by the time that they're 18. What rape means is sexual intercourse, and when it's against a woman's will, basically.
Whenever we've done the interviews on rape on our program, it's been said over and over again that rape is not a sexual act, it is a violent act. And it's done to harm and hurt the person. It's not done to satisfy the sexual needs of the person who's perpetrating it. When we talk about marital rape, are we talking about violence done to the woman outside of the sexual act itself? The beating, the stomping, the hit, all the things that associate with violence in this situation.
The violence is really the rape. It's the violation. In fact, in some other languages, like in French, the word is to violate. You violate someone else's integrity when you force them into a sexual act. And that is, when people say, they say rape and violence, which is a total, that is what's really conflicting. I mean, rape is the ultimate violence. It's the ultimate degradation and humiliation. And it is a sexual act, not so much for sexual pleasure, but it's a sexual act in the sense it's an attack on that person's sexuality, that person's integrity. And that is the same in marriage as it is out, and that is one of the things that we're trying to do to change the laws. The project that I run in California is the National Clearinghouse on Marital Rape. It's a project of the Women's History Research Center in Berkeley. And we're trying to get people working on this issue so that there will be greater public understanding, and there are now cases all over the country where juries are getting.
Can you give us an example of some of the cases?
Well, in California we have, for instance, 16 convictions, and the first one was a woman who was raped by her husband. They were still living together. This is not possible in the state of Washington. It's only a felony if they have been legally separated. So we say that in Washington, in the state of Washington, that women do not yet have the right to consent to control over their own bodies when they are living together. So we're still working on that one. And in California we did win in 1979. I ran the campaign there against tremendous odds, but some DAs, district attorneys, did come up and defend the fact that they wanted to be able to prosecute the cases that have been coming up.
How do you prove something like this? I mean, how in
you
fact...
You prove it the same. This is what's important. If you appeal the exemption for husbands, and the exemption was there, give them the right to rape their wives, then you have rape being rape, and no matter who the perpetrator is. And so you prove it the same way you prove any rape case.
Yes, but if in the bedroom situation where there are two people, and you have a woman who decides to press charges because she feels she's been raped by her husband, it's the classic case of her word against his.
But most rape situations are. I mean, they don't ask for you to have witness anywhere in most civilized states. They find out a way that
but there are
took away those corroboration requirements.
Other kinds of pieces of evidence that can point a more accusing finger and with with greater proof.
But if you have a double standard, then you're discriminating against the woman because she's married.
That's right, but the double standard I don't see comes into play here in a terribly important fashion.
But that's what the exemption for husbands is about. It's saying that in the bedroom he owns her, or in his castle he owns her. And it's a different standard for people who are not married and for people who are. And that's
you get into the court, though. You get into the court, and the woman says, this man is my husband, and he also raped me, and I'm trying to draw a scenario in my mind now with a prosecuting attorney and a defense attorney, and the defense attorney says, prove it, and the prosecuting attorney says, well, here's the evidence, and it's mostly verbal, you see.
Well, it's not mostly verbal, I think. Not at this point yet. I mean, I would like for that to be true, and I think with a greater understanding it will be true when she's able to simply say he forced me and describe what it felt like. But mostly they're using weapons now. In the cases that have come, they're easier to prosecute for the district attorneys because they're new. They're the first cases in each county usually of spousal rape.
Could you give us an example? We didn't get to those examples. Maybe
Right.
if we heard some of the examples that have actually won, we'd have a better understanding.
Usually it's like part of a battering situation where there are knives used, where there are guns used. They are raped with, not only with his using the penis and beating her first, but often with some kind of other object like a 16-inch tire iron or a crowbar or a mouthwash bottle. The case I started to tell you about, the first conviction was up in Redding, California, and he raped her in the standard way with the penis and also raped her with a broken mouthwash bottle.
Well, when you say he raped her with a penis, I'm sorry, it almost sounds as if it was something like a weapon he was holding in his hand. Isn't that a...
Well, if you can use anything as a weapon. I mean, you can use the famous example of this cliche about a husband being henpecked. He is being beaten with a rolling pin by his wife. The rolling pin, you can either use it to create something that you're baking, or you can use it as a weapon. I mean, that is the point. It is the sexual organs being used as a weapon by the aggressor. And so it gets very confused when people say it's not sex. But the point is, it is the use of sex for a violent act.
But you used the broken bottle and raping her with that. Obviously, we're talking about a very violent, damaging sort of thing to the woman. And those cases, I can understand how they
But she was not more damaged by the broken bottle. She was physically damaged by the broken bottle. It was, again, in her anus. But what she was most damaged by was the betrayal of trust that happened when her husband broke the covenant between them to harm her.
Legally, how can she testify against her husband in the state? This is what we're talking about.
This is in California.
This is how
we took away his privilege
to rape her. That's what you're talking about. Because
in 1979.
Let me try to explore just how vulnerable a husband is in this particular situation. Now, let's suppose he and his wife engage in, sexual intercourse. Halfway through the act, she changes her mind, and gets somewhat hysterical and says, "Stop, I don't want to do this anymore." And he continues. Is he liable legally?
In a case in New Zealand, that actually happened because he was hurting her. I mean, she had consented to previous, her understanding of their previous sexual relationship, at which point all of a sudden he became violent in the middle of it, and she said stop, and he continued. And the judge did agree that he should be prosecuted, and he was convicted.
Oh, my goodness.
She didn't consent to force.
No.
You see. I mean, why shouldn't a woman have a right to say no anytime, anywhere, and as well as yes? Do you think the or even initiate the sexual act? I mean, this is what we're trying to do, is to have control of our own lives and
But I can see some men who, suppose we have a lot more headlines about this. Suppose the kinds of cases we're talking about are brought into the courts more frequently. There's a lot more coverage in magazines and newspapers around the country about this. It seems to me that there could be, for men who have wives, some difficult kinds of questions they have to ask themselves in their minds.
But that's good. What's the matter with that? That's exactly what we're trying to do. I mean, they should stop treating wives as if they were their own property. And by the way, in California, we've changed it so that the woman, any woman can also be prosecuted if she tries to force a man, any man, into a sexual act. Again, usually she would be using an accomplice or a gun or some kind of a weapon to compensate for the difference in size and brute strength there. But no one should be able to force anything on anybody. And this is a crime against society, and that's why it's prosecuted. And if a man starts thinking about, well, maybe I should ask instead of take. I mean, little boys are